The afternoon sun cut through the high windows of the evergreen conservatory's main auditorium, turning specks of dust into gold. It was a Tuesday, which meant the room was supposed to be quiet, reserved for individual practice. But where Leo Thorne was, quiet was a rare visitor. Leo, 17, owned the space. Not officially, of course, but in every way that felt real to him. His fingers, long and sure, danced across the keys of the grand piano, pulling from it the stormy, beautiful emotions of a Rachmaninoff prelude. A small crowd had gathered, a few juniors who admired him, a couple of seniors who tolerated his showmanship for the sake of his talent, and some first-years who were just plain impressed. They sat in the first few rows, backpacks forgotten, watching the drama unfold on the hunch of his shoulders and the flash of his hands. He loved this. The music was part of it, sure. He loved the way the chords vibrated in his chest, the challenge of a tricky run. But more than that, he loved the audience. He loved the way their attention focused on him, a warm spotlight he could feel on his skin. He finished a particularly difficult passage with a flourish, the last note ringing in the air before it was swallowed by the soft, shuffling sounds of approval. Someone clapped lightly. "Man, Leo, you've got that down cold," said a boy from the cello section. Leaning forward on his knees, Leo didn't turn around, just gave a little half shrug, a smirk playing on his lips. "It's getting there," he said, his voice casual, as if the piece wasn't one of the most technically demanding in the repertoire. The middle section still a bit muddy. He was about to launch into it again, to show them how the muddy part was supposed to sound, when he heard it. A soft, rhythmic squeak, then a swish, squeak, swish, squeak dash swish. It was a familiar, mundane sound, completely out of place in the world of Rachmaninoff. It was the sound of the mop. His eyes flicked towards the far aisle. There she was, the janitor. He didn't know her name. He'd never thought to learn it. She was just the cleaning lady. She was maybe his mother's age, with dark hair pulled back into a neat, practical bun. She wore the standard staff uniform, simple blue pants and a pale blue shirt. She moved slowly, methodically, pushing the mop bucket ahead of her with one hand while the other guided the mop in slow, broad arcs across the gleaming floor. She was small, and she worked with a kind of quiet focus, her eyes on her task, trying to be invisible, and she was ruining his moment every time he paused between phrases. The squeak swish filled the space. It was like a tiny, annoying needle popping the beautiful bubble he was building. He saw one of the first-years glance back at her, then back at him, a faint smile on his face. Was he laughing? Was this funny? Irritation, hot and quick, rose in Leo's chest. This was his auditorium, his piano, his audience. He played a loud, dramatic chord, trying to drown out the sound of her work. But the mop just kept swishing. He finished the phrase with more force than necessary and let his hands drop to his lap. With a sigh loud enough for his audience to hear, he swiveled on the piano bench to face them, running a hand through his carefully messy hair. "Hard to find the muse with all the housekeeping," he said, his voice dripping with exaggerated annoyance. A few kids chuckled, following his gaze to the woman in the aisle. She didn't look up. She just kept mopping, moving closer now. She was maybe 20 feet away. Leo's mind, always quick, always looking for the angle, for the laugh, for the way to turn a situation back to his advantage, started working. He watched her for a moment. She was so ordinary, so separate from the world of concertos and cadenzas that lived in this room. An idea, mean and playful, clicked into place, a joke, a harmless little joke to break the tension and remind everyone who the real artist here was. He put on his most charming, trouble-making smile. It was a smile his friends knew well. "Hey," he called out, his voice friendly but loud, echoing in the hall. "You there, working hard, I see." The woman finally paused. She straightened up, one hand on the mop handle, the other on her hip. She looked at him, her expression calm, patient, and utterly unreadable. She didn't smile, but she didn't frown either. She just waited, encouraged by the attention of his friends. Leo waved a hand towards the magnificent, glossy black piano behind him. "You're polishing everything else. The keys could probably use a wipe from the inside, you know?" He paused, letting the setup land. "Tell you what, come on up, take a break, play something for us." A snort of laughter came from the cellist. This was more like it. Leo leaned forward, his grin widening. "Go on. I bet you know asterisk chopsticks asterisk, right? Everyone knows asterisk chopsticks asterisk. I'll even give you a free lesson after. What do you say?" The small crowd tittered, a mix of real amusement and nervous energy. They all looked at the janitor. Her eyes moved from Leo's face to the piano, then back to his face. For a second, Leo thought he saw something flash in her dark eyes, not anger, not embarrassment, but something else, something old and deep. It was gone so fast he was sure he'd imagined it. Then, she did the last thing he expected. She nodded. Just a single, small, polite dip of her head. Not a nod of acceptance to his challenge, but more like a nod of acknowledgement, as if to say, I heard you, Then, without a word, she turned her attention back to her mop bucket. She gave the mop a final, efficient wringing out in the roller, set it neatly in its slot, and began pushing the whole contraption slowly up the aisle toward the double doors at the back. Squeak swish, squeak swish. The laughter from the students died down, replaced by a few murmurs. The joke had fallen flat. She hadn't gotten flustered. She hadn't run away. She had just nodded and gone back to work. Leo felt a hot prickling on the back of his neck. He'd been dismissed by the cleaning lady. His cool, easy joke had just evaporated, leaving him looking a bit silly, trying to show off for an audience that was now watching a woman push a mop bucket out the door. He turned back to the piano with a forced laugh. Tough crowd, he muttered, trying to regain his composure. He placed his hands on the keys, but the magic was gone. The Rachmaninoff now felt like a chore. All he could think about was that quiet, unimpressed nod, as the heavy auditorium door swung shut behind her with a soft thud. The room felt emptier, and the silence she left behind was louder than any mop could ever be. Leo played a few more bars, but his heart wasn't in it. The students, sensing the shift, soon began to gather their things, making excuses about homework and sectionals. Leo stayed on the bench long after they'd left, staring at the silent, gleaming keys. The challenge hadn't ended with a laugh. It had just begun, and he had a strange, unsettled feeling that the next move wasn't going to be his. The next day, Leo's mood hadn't improved much. That quiet nod from the janitor had stuck in his head, a tiny splinter he couldn't quite dig out. He told himself it was nothing. She was just shy, or maybe she didn't speak much English. But the way she'd looked at him, it bothered him. It wasn't the look of someone who was scared or embarrassed. It was the look of someone who was busy. He had a free period before lunch and decided to head to the auditorium to practice for real, without an audience. He needed to work on the fingering for that tricky section, the one he'd complained about. The hall was his favorite place to think, the high ceiling and empty seats making his own problems feel smaller, more manageable. He pushed through the heavy door, the familiar scent of old wood and lemon polish greeting him. The morning light was different, softer, streaming in and painting long rectangles on the floor. And there she was. The janitor was at the piano, not playing it, of course. She was cleaning it. She had a small step stool placed beside the grand piano's open lid. She stood on it, leaning carefully into the vast, hollow body of the instrument. In one hand she held a soft, white cloth. In the other, a small bottle of what Leo knew was special piano polish. He watched, frozen for a second by the door. As she worked, she wasn't just wiping dust. This was a ritual. She polished the golden hinges inside the lid with slow, circular care. She ran her cloth, impossibly gentle, along the lengths of the taut steel strings, making them hum a faint, ghostly chord. She meticulously cleaned the felt of the hammers. Every movement was deliberate, respectful. She treated the piano not like a piece of school furniture, but like something fragile and alive. Leo felt that old irritation flare again, mixed with something new, a weird sense of intrusion. This was his instrument. He was the one who made it sing, and here she was, inside it, like a doctor performing an operation. He let the door swing shut with a louder thud than he meant to. The sound echoed in the empty hall. She didn't jump. She didn't even startle. She simply finished the curve of the string she was polishing, placed her cloth down on the lid, and stepped off the stool. She turned to look at him, her expression the same calm, neutral mask from the day before. She gave him that same small, polite nod. "Good morning," she said. Her voice was soft, accented, and clear. "Yeah," Leo said, shoving his hands in his pockets. He walked down the aisle, his shoes clicking on the floor. He wanted to say something clever, something to reclaim the space, getting it ready for someone who can actually use it. She just looked at him, waiting. Her silence was infuriating. It made him feel like he was 12 years old. The door at the back creaked open again. A couple of students wandered in, probably looking for a quiet place to talk. They saw Leo by the piano, saw the janitor, and lingered, leaning against the back wall. Leo saw them. An audience. A small one, but an audience nonetheless. Yesterday's failed joke needed a do-over. He put on a smile, but it felt tight on his face. He gestured grandly at the piano bench. So, we were interrupted yesterday. The offer still stands. He made his voice light, playful, the way he did when he was charming adults at recitals. Come on, the keys are all shiny now. You've done half the job already. Play something for us, anything. The two students at the back exchanged a glance. Their interest peaked. This was better than gossiping. The janitor Althea, though Leo still didn't know her name, glanced at the piano. Then she looked at her hands. They were good hands, but they were workers' hands. Short, clean nails, the skin looking a bit rough from chemicals and work. She rubbed her thumb across her fingertips, a thoughtful gesture. Leo misread her hesitation. He pounced, his voice taking on a mocking, sing-song tone. What's the matter? Stage fright? Don't worry, we're a friendly crowd. I told you, I'll give you a free lesson after. Start with middle C, you know. The white one in the middle. He reached out and pinged the key. The note, bright and singular, hung in the air. One of the students at the back snickered. That did it. Leo saw her shoulders set, a small, almost invisible straightening of her spine. Her thoughtful expression smoothed into something blanker, more resolved. She looked directly at him, and this time, there was no missing the flash in her eyes. It wasn't anger. It was colder. It was decision. Without a word, she walked to her cleaning cart parked in the side aisle. She took the bottle of polish and the cloth, placing them neatly in their designated spots. She then picked up a different cloth, a dry one, and wiped her hands thoroughly, finger by finger. Leo watched, his confident smirk starting to feel stale. This wasn't going how he'd pictured. She was supposed to mumble an excuse and hurry away. She wasn't supposed to prepare. She walked back to the piano. She didn't look at Leo, or at the two students now creeping closer for a better view. She looked only at the instrument. She picked up her step stool and moved it out of the way, placing it silently against the wall. Then, she turned to the piano bench. Leo was still sitting on it. For a long, awkward second, she just stood there, waiting. The message was clear. He was in her seat. A hot blush crept up Leo's neck. He scrambled up, too quickly, and took a few steps back, joining the small audience that was now 3 people strong. All yours, he said, trying to sound generous and failing. She sat down. Not the way Leo did, with a dramatic flourish. She sat with a quiet, simple grace, smoothing her plain blue work pants beneath her. She adjusted the bench just slightly, a small movement born of instinct. She looked at the keyboard. It was a vast landscape of black and white, a territory Leo felt he ruled. She let her hands rest in her lap for a moment. She closed her eyes. She took a slow, deep breath that seemed to draw all the sound from the huge room. The shuffling of the students stopped. The distant hum of the school vanished. In that absolute quiet, she seemed to change. The tired lines around her eyes softened. The careful, invisible posture of a worker fell away. She became still, focused, and powerfully present. Leo felt a first, tiny knot of doubt twist in his stomach. This wasn't the posture of someone about to hunt for middle C. She opened her eyes. They were different now, sharp, alive, seeing nothing but the music in her mind. She lifted her hands. Her work-roughened fingers, which had just been wiping polish, hovered over the keys. And then she began. The first note was not a note. It was a whisper, a sigh from the deepest part of the piano. It was a low, resonant chord, played so softly it was almost a feeling more than a sound. Then her right hand moved, a blur, and a cascade of notes spilled out high, crystalline, impossibly fast, like water over glass. They were not random notes. They were a melody of heartbreaking beauty and terrifying difficulty. Weaving around the dark, anchoring chord in her left hand, Leo's brain short-circuited. He knew this piece. He knew it. It was the opening of Franz Liszt's La Campanella, a piece so fiendishly hard it was a badge of honor for concert pianists. It required impossible stretches, lightning speed, and a delicate touch to make its bells sing instead of clatter. And she was playing it, not stumbling, not slowly. She was playing it. The two students gasped, their hands flying to their mouths. Leo felt his own jaw go slack. He couldn't move. He could only watch. Her hands were a miracle. They flew across the keys, leaping and dancing, her left hand pounding out powerful octaves while her right hand executed runs so precise. They sounded like a machine, if a machine could also weep with joy. The music filled the auditorium, no longer a whisper, but a thunderstorm contained in a crystal box. It was playful, fierce, sorrowful, and triumphant. All at once, she wasn't just playing the notes. She was telling a story with them. Her body moved with the music, a slight sway, a bend of the wrist, a tilt of the head. She was no longer the janitor in a blue uniform. She was a composer, a poet, a force of nature channeled through this piano she had just been polishing. Leo's arrogant smirk was a distant memory. His world, which had been so perfectly centered on his own talent, cracked open. The joke, the cruel, stupid joke, echoed in his mind, hollow and pathetic. I'll give you a free lesson. The words burned in his ears. The most ignorant thing he had ever said. He wasn't looking at a beginner. He wasn't even looking at a talented student. He was witnessing an artist, a real one. And he was just a boy showing off in an empty room. The music swelled, climbed to a dizzying peak, and then ended not with a bang, but with a series of fading, shimmering trills that vanished into the air, leaving behind a silence so deep and complete it felt like a physical thing. She let her hands fall softly into her lap. She was breathing a little harder. She opened her eyes, and for a moment, she looked distant, as if waking from a dream. Then she slowly turned on the bench to face them. No one made a sound. The students were staring, tears glistening in one of their eyes. Leo felt like he'd been punched in the chest. All the air was gone from the room. The janitor looked at Leo. Her face was calm again. The fire in her eyes banked. She didn't smile. She didn't look angry. She just looked at him, waiting for his free lesson to begin. But Leo had nothing to say. His voice, his confidence, his entire understanding of who he was, had been left in shattered pieces on the polished floor. The only thing left was the echo of a genius that had just silenced them all. The silence that followed was not like any other silence. It was thick, heavy, alive. It hummed with the ghost of the last, perfect note. The very air in the auditorium seemed charged, pressing in on Leo's ears. He could hear his own heartbeat, a frantic drum against his ribs, and the shaky, stunned breath of the two students beside him. The janitor simply sat there on the piano bench, her hands resting quietly in her lap. She didn't look triumphant. She didn't look like she just won anything. She looked composed, as if she had stepped out of her own life for 3 minutes and had now, gracefully, stepped back in. Her gaze was on Leo, but it wasn't demanding. It was patient. It asked the question his own arrogant challenge had posed. What now? Leo's mouth was dry. His tongue felt like a useless piece of cloth. He tried to form words: an apology, a question, a gasp of all, but nothing came out. The clever, quick-talking prodigy was gone. In his place was a boy who had just seen the ocean for the first time. After bragging about his backyard pond, one of the students, a girl with wide eyes, broke the spell with a single, soft clap. It was a tiny sound, but it echoed. Then she clapped again, joined hesitantly by her friend. Their applause wasn't loud or wild. It was reverent, almost confused, as if they weren't sure what they had just witnessed, but knew it required respect. The sound of the clapping seemed to wake Leo up. He flinched. His face, which had been pale with shock, flooded with a deep, burning red. Shame washed over him, hot and sickening, followed by a dizzying wave of awe. He had been so stupid, so unbelievably, cruelly stupid. Before he could choke out a syllable, the heavy door at the back of the auditorium swung open. The principal, a tall, serious man with glasses perched on his nose, stood there. He had been walking past, drawn by the extraordinary music that had spilled into the hallway. He had heard the final, breathtaking minute. Now, he took in the scene, the small, stunned audience, the brilliant young pianist he knew standing frozen in humiliation, and the school janitor sitting calmly at the grand piano. He walked down the aisle, his footsteps the only sound. He stopped a few feet from the piano, looking from the janitor's calm face to Leo's stricken one. His expression was one of profound confusion and dawning realization. "Althea?" the principal said gently, using her name in a way Leo never had. Was that you?" The janitor Althea turned her head and gave the principal the same respectful nod she gave everyone. "Yes, sir," she said, her voice still that soft, clear thread in the quiet room. The principal shook his head slowly, not in denial, but in wonder. I have no words. That was La Campanella. I haven't heard it played like that since I was a student at the conservatory myself." He took a step closer. "Where on earth did you learn to play like that?" It was the question hanging in everyone's mind. Leo's eyes snapped to her, desperate for the answer. Who was she? Althea looked down at her hands, resting on her work pants. She rubbed a thumb over a faint callus on her finger, not from piano practice, but from pushing a mop. When she looked up, her gaze was far away, looking past the walls of evergreen, past the country, across an ocean. In the Philippines, she began, her voice a little stronger, laced with the melody of a different accent. When I was small, my mother was a music teacher, piano. We did not have much, but we had an old upright, its keys yellow like old teeth. A faint, sad smile touched her lips. She said I had the ears. I could repeat a tune after hearing it once. She spoke slowly, choosing her English words with care, painting pictures with them. By 7, I was playing pieces children should not play. By 10, I had won the national competition for my age, not just my town or my island, the whole country. She said it not with pride, but with a simple statement of fact, like describing the weather of a long ago day. Leo felt a cold knot form in his stomach. National champion. At 10, there was a scholarship, Althea continued, her eyes on that distant memory. A big one, to a very good academy, in Vienna. The name of the city dropped into the silent room like a stone into a still pond. Vienna, the heart of classical music. A dream. They heard a tape I made. They wanted me to come. The principal leaned forward, captivated. What happened? Althea's faraway look sharpened into something more present, more painful. My father got sick, very sick. The medicine. It was not free. The trip to Europe, even with the scholarship. It cost money we did not have. Money for clothes, for the flight, for a little to live on. She paused, and the silence was filled with the unspoken struggle of that choice. My younger brother and sister, they were smart in school. They needed books, uniforms, to go to a good high school. She spread her hands, the workers' hands, and looked at them. The piano could not buy medicine. It could not pay for school fees. It was a beautiful dream. But dreams do not feed a family. Leo's breath caught. He thought of his own life. The expensive piano his parents had bought him. The private tutors. The summers at music camps. It had all just been given, expected. So, Althea said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, I chose. I let the scholarship go. I took any work I could find. Then, I came here, to this country. The pay was better. I could send money home. For the medicine. For my brother's engineering degree. For my sister to become a teacher. She looked directly at Leo then, and for the first time, he saw a deep, tired sorrow in her eyes. The piano. I put it away. For many years, I did not touch one. It was like a friend you must say goodbye to. It hurt too much to remember. She turned slightly and gently ran her fingers along the edge of the keyboard, not pressing the keys, just feeling the smooth wood. When I got this job, to clean this room, it was hard at first. To be so close to this beautiful instrument every day, to dust it, to polish it, and never to play. She took a shuddering breath. But then, it became a different kind of love, a quiet love. I took care of it. I made sure it was ready for students like you, so their dreams could be loud. Her words, students like you, hung in the air. Leo felt them like a physical blow. His dream was loud, arrogant, and fed by privilege. Hers had been silent, sacrificed, and had fed her family. The principal had tears in his eyes. He removed his glasses and wiped them with his handkerchief. The two students were openly crying, no longer trying to hide it. Your family? The principal asked softly. Your father? He got better, Althea said, and a real, warm light finally touched her face. For many years, because of the medicine. My brother is an engineer now, in Manila. My sister teaches math at our old high school. She looked around the grand auditorium, at the empty seats that usually held students with bright, untested futures. They have good lives. They have their families. That is the music I made. It is just a different kind of song. The understanding that settled over the room was immense. This was not a story of lost talent. This was a story of transformed talent. Her genius hadn't vanished. It had been converted, like a powerful energy, into something else: security, opportunity, love. She hadn't played a concerto on a world stage, but she had conducted the symphony of her family's survival, and it had been a masterpiece. Leo finally found his voice. It came out cracked and small, the voice of a child. I'm so sorry. The words were utterly inadequate. They were dust. I'm an idiot. Althea looked at him. She studied his face, the genuine horror and shame etched there. She saw the shattered arrogance, and in its place, the beginnings of raw, painful understanding. Her gaze softened, not into forgiveness, which would have been too easy, but into something like recognition. Recognition of a young man who had, perhaps for the first time, truly listened. "You are young," she said simply, "and you have a gift. But a gift is a responsibility. It is not a weapon." She stood up from the piano bench, her movement bringing her back to her full, unassuming height. She was once again the janitor, the caregiver of the room. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have not finished cleaning the practice rooms upstairs." She walked to her cart, picked up her polishing cloth, and placed it neatly in its bucket. She gave the principal one more respectful nod. She did not look at Leo again. She just pushed her cart, with its familiar squeaky wheel, up the side aisle toward the door, leaving behind the scent of lemon polish and the echoing, life-changing silence of her truth. The squeak of the janitor's cart faded as the door swung shut behind her, but the silence she left in the auditorium was different now. Before, it had been stunned, shocked by the music. Now, it was weighed down by the story. It was a heavy, thoughtful quiet. Leo stood rooted to the spot. He felt hollowed out. The flashy, confident version of himself that had been in this room just 10 minutes ago seemed like a stranger, a loud and foolish ghost. He could still feel the heat of shame on his face, but underneath it was something else, a profound, aching sadness for a story that wasn't his, and a dizzying sense of how small his own world had been. The principal let out a long, slow breath. He put a hand on Leo's shoulder. The touch was not angry. It was heavy, like the silence. "I think," the principal said, his voice low and careful, "you have had the most important lesson of your education today, and it didn't come from any of us teachers." Leo could only nod, his throat too tight to speak. The two students who had witnessed everything slowly gathered their things. They walked past Leo, not with the usual casual nods, but with solemn, almost shy glances. One of them, the girl who had clapped, stopped. She looked like she wanted to say something, but words failed her too. She just gave him a small, sympathetic look that said, "I know, I feel it too," before she followed her friend out. Leo was alone with the principal and the grand piano. The instrument sat there, gleaming under the stage lights, looking almost smug. It had held a secret, and now the secret was out. "I had no idea," the principal murmured, more to himself than to Leo. She interviewed for the custodial position 3 years ago. Her references were for office cleaning, hotel work. Nothing in her file said, **. He shook his head in disbelief. To carry that inside her, quietly, all this time. Those words echoed in Leo's mind, **to carry that inside her. He thought of Althea polishing the piano strings with a tenderness he now understood. He thought of her silent, efficient movements in the halls, never bothering anyone. She had been carrying a whole symphony inside her, a symphony of sacrifice, while he'd been marching around with his little solo, thinking it was the only music that mattered. "What do I do?" The question burst from Leo's lips, raw and desperate. I can't just go to my next class." The principal considered him. "Probably not," he agreed. "But this isn't about making you feel better, Leo. This is about what you learn from it. This is about respect, not just for her, but for the art you say you love." He gave Leo's shoulder a final pat. "I'll leave you with it. I think you need to sit with this for a while." He left then, his own footsteps thoughtful as he walked up the aisle. The door clicked shut, and Leo was truly alone. He didn't go to the piano. He couldn't. It felt like sacred ground now, a place he had defiled with his arrogance. Instead, he sank into a seat in the front row, the same row where his friends had sat to watch his performance yesterday. It felt like a lifetime ago. He put his head in his hands. The images replayed behind his eyes, her rough hands flying over the keys. The calm, sorrowful look as she spoke about Vienna. The word scholarship took on a new, brutal meaning. For him, a scholarship was an achievement, a line on a college application. For her, it had been a lifeline she had to let go, watching it float away to keep others from drowning. He thought about his own parents, how they'd scraped to pay for his lessons, sure, but never once had he feared the piano would be taken away because someone needed medicine. His biggest sacrifice was giving up weekend hangouts to practice. The comparison made him feel sick. The bell rang for the next period, a distant, tinny sound. Leo didn't move. He sat there as the sounds of the school changed around him, the rush of hallway noise, then the quiet of classes starting. He was supposed to be in music theory. He was the star of music theory. Right now, the thought of walking into that room, of seeing the knowing looks if the story had already started to spread, made his skin crawl after what felt like an hour, but was probably only 20 minutes. A new sound broke into his thoughts. The familiar squeak swish, the soft bump of a cart against a door. His head snapped up. Althea had returned. She was back at her work, pushing her mop in slow, steady strokes across the back of the auditorium floor. She worked her way down the far aisle, not looking at him, giving him the space and the silence he was sitting in. Leo watched her, really watched her. He saw the careful way she maneuvered the cart around the seats, the focused attention she gave to a sticky spot on the floor. This was her craft, too. It was done with the same meticulous care she had used on the piano. It was a different kind of performance, one no one usually applauded. He knew he had to say something. The apology he'd stammered earlier was a child's word. It wasn't enough. He stood up. His legs felt shaky. He walked up the aisle, not toward the center, but along the side, so he wouldn't walk on the wet floor she had just cleaned. He stopped a few feet from where she was wringing out the mop. She paused and looked up, her expression neutral, waiting. Leo started, then swallowed. I don't know how to fix what I said. He gestured helplessly back toward the piano. That was the most. I've never heard anyone play like that. Not on recordings, not in concerts, never. Althea gave a small, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement. Not thanks. Just hearing him, and what you did for your family. Leo's voice broke. I can't even imagine it. My problems are so stupid. I'm so embarrassed. For everything. Althea leaned on her mop handle. She studied him for a long moment. She saw the genuine turmoil, the shattered pride. Embarrassment is a light feeling, she said finally. It comes and it goes. What you should feel is weight. Leo asked, confused. The weight of your gift, she said. Her eyes were serious. You play very well. I have heard you. You have technique. You have a good teacher. But music is not just in the fingers. She touched her own chest. It isn't here. It is a life. My life is in that piece I played. The hope, the sadness, the letting go, the love for my family. That is the weight. You cannot play that until you have lived more than your scales. Her words landed on him, each one a stone, building a new foundation in the empty space where his arrogance had been. I have nothing to teach you, Leo said, the truth of it both painful and freeing. The things I said, about a lesson, a flicker of something, not a smile, but perhaps a faint light of understanding passed over her face. You already had your lesson today, she said. It just did not come from a book. She turned back to her cart, signaling the conversation was ending. But Leo couldn't let her go yet. Could I? He blurted out. Would it be okay if sometimes, when you're here, I could listen, not to show you anything, just to hear you play? For real. Althea stopped. She looked at the piano, then at her hands, then at this young, changed boy in front of her. The wall of quiet professionalism softened, just a fraction. This room is empty on Thursday evenings after 6, she said quietly, not making a promise, just stating a fact. I finish my work then. Sometimes, for a few minutes, I play. For myself. Not list, simpler things. Old folk songs from my home. It was an offering. Not forgiveness, not friendship, but a truce. A small, shared space in the world of music. That would be an honor, Leo said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. Althea gave one more of her small, polite nods. Then she went back to mopping, the squeak swish filling the quiet space between them. A simple, honest sound. Leo stood there for another moment, watching her work. He didn't see a janitor anymore. He saw a musician. He saw a sister, a daughter, a hero who wore a blue uniform. He turned and walked out of the auditorium. The hallway buzzed with its normal chaos, but it sounded different to him now. It was full of other people's symphonies, other people's silent waits and quiet dreams. He walked to his locker, not seeing the familiar faces, his mind still back in the silent, sunlit room where the real music and the real lesson had finally been played. The next Thursday, Leo found himself hovering outside the closed doors of the auditorium at 10 minutes past 6. His heart was doing a nervous, stuttering rhythm against his ribs. He had told no one he was coming. The story of what happened had, of course, spread through the conservatory like a wildfire. But it had changed in the telling. It was less about his humiliation and more about the legend of the janitor virtuoso. People spoke about it in hushed, excited tones. Some didn't believe it. Others made up wild stories about why she was hiding. Leo knew the truth, and it made him feel both heavy and light. Heavy with the responsibility of knowing her story. Light because his own world had grown so much bigger. He heard it first as a faint vibration through the heavy wood of the door, not the thunderous, brilliant cascade of La Campanella. This was different. It was a melody, simple and pure, flowing like a slow, deep river. It was mournful and beautiful all at once, filled with a longing that pulled at him. It was the sound of a memory, of a home far away. He pushed the door open as quietly as he could and slipped inside. The auditorium was dark except for a single ghost light on the stage, which pooled around the grand piano. Althea sat there, out of her work uniform, in a simple, faded floral blouse. She was playing, her eyes closed, her body swaying just slightly with the current of the music. Leo stood in the shadows of the back row, not daring to move. This was not a performance. This was a private conversation she was having with the piano, with her past. He felt like an intruder, but he couldn't bring himself to leave. The music was a story without words, a story of green mountains and warm rain, of family dinners and missed goodbyes. He listened until the last note faded, leaving a comfortable, peaceful silence in its wake. Althea opened her eyes. She didn't seem startled to find him there. She had probably heard the door. She turned on the bench and looked toward the darkness where he stood. "You can come closer," she said, her voice gentle. "Just don't turn on the big lights." He walked down the aisle, his footsteps echoing softly. He stopped at the edge of the stage, looking up. "That was beautiful," he said. "What was it?" "An old Kundaman," she said. "A love song from my country. Not romantic love. A love for your home, for your family, for what you have lost." She patted the space on the bench beside her. "Come, sit." Leo climbed the steps to the stage, feeling a jolt of nerves. Sitting next to her at the piano felt like a greater privilege than playing a solo at a recital. He sat, careful to keep a respectful distance. "Play something for me," she said. It wasn't a command or a challenge. It was an invitation. Panic shot through him. "After hearing you? I can't." "You can," she said calmly. "Play not for me. Play for you. Play the piece you love the most. The one that feels like it is yours." Hesitantly, Leo placed his hands on the keys. He thought of flashy pieces, of technically impressive etudes he used to show off. They all felt wrong now, like cheap plastic trinkets. Instead, his fingers found their way to the opening of a Chopin nocturne. It was a piece he rarely played for others because it was slow, not flashy, and it required feeling, not just fingerwork. He'd always been a bit scared of its simplicity. He began to play. He made mistakes. His rhythm was shaky at first, but he kept going. He thought of the sadness in Althea's story, of the weight she carried. He thought of his own small world, and for the first time, he tried to pour something real from his own heart into the music, not pride, but a new kind of longing to understand, to be better. When he finished, the last note hung between them. It was quiet, imperfect, but it was honest. Althea nodded slowly. "Better," she said simply. "I heard you listening, just now. Not just with your ears." She pointed to the sheet music holder, which was empty. "You do not need to prove anything to this piano. It already knows. It only wants the truth." That became their unspoken ritual. Thursday evenings, after 6. Sometimes he would arrive to find her already playing a classical piece, a folk tune, something he didn't recognize. Other times, she would be waiting, polishing the wood, and she would gesture for him to play first. She never gave him a formal lesson. She would simply listen, and then make a single observation. "That part is angry. Why are your fingers afraid of the anger?" Or, "This melody is a sad smile. Let it be sad. Do not try to fix it." Her comments were never about technique. They were always about the heart of the music. And slowly, Leo's playing began to change. The showy, hard-edged brilliance softened. A new depth, a tenderness, started to appear. His music teacher pulled him aside one day, a puzzled but pleased look on his face. "What's happened to you, Leo? You're playing like you've lived another 10 years. Leo just smiled and said, "I've been listening better." The change wasn't just in his music. It was in the halls of Evergreen. The students, inspired by the story they'd only heard whispers of, began to see the school staff differently. The woman who served lunch in the cafeteria was thanked by name. The old custodian who fixed things was greeted with genuine smiles. A first-year violinist, struggling with a case that wouldn't latch, was stunned when the quiet groundskeeper knelt down, showed her a hidden clasp she'd never seen, and fixed it in seconds. "Used to fix my daughter's cello case all the time," he'd muttered before walking away. A new, quiet respect seeped into the culture of the school. It became less about the stars on the stage and more about the community. That made the stage possible. The joke Leo had once made would have fallen utterly flat now. It belonged to a past everyone was glad to have moved beyond. One Thursday, weeks later, Leo was working on a difficult passage in a Beethoven sonata. He was frustrated, hitting the same wrong note. He slammed his hand on the keys in a discordant crash. "It's useless." Althea, who had been quietly listening from a front row seat, not cleaning for once, just being an audience, stood up. She walked onto the stage and sat beside him. She didn't speak. She just placed her own hands on the keys, her rough, capable fingers next to his smoother ones. She played the four-note phrase he was struggling with. She played it slowly, not with perfect Beethoven technique, but with a clear, singing tone. She played it as if each note were a word in an important sentence. "It is not a battle," she said softly. "It is a conversation. You are shouting at Beethoven. He will not shout back. Listen to what he is trying to say." She played it again, and this time, Leo heard it. The yearning in the interval, the resolution in the final note. It wasn't a technical hurdle. It was an emotion. He tried again, slower. He thought of the conversation, not the conquest. The notes flowed, connected, and made sense. A look of pure, unguarded joy spread across Althea's face. It was the first true smile he had ever seen from her. It transformed her completely, erasing the lines of weariness, lighting up her eyes. In that moment, she wasn't a janitor or a sacrificed prodigy. She was a teacher, and she had just seen her student finally understand. "Yes," she whispered. Just like that. That was the moment Leo truly understood her gift to him. It wasn't the mind-blowing performance that had shattered his arrogance. That was the demolition. These quiet Thursday evenings. This patient guidance back to the love of the music itself. This was the rebuilding. She was giving him back his gift, but cleaned of the poison of pride, polished into something stronger and truer. The school year moved on. Leo practiced harder than he ever had, but with a different purpose. He auditioned for a prestigious summer program and, for the first time, played with such emotional depth that the judges wrote notes about his unusual maturity. On the last Thursday before summer break, Leo brought a small, carefully wrapped gift to the auditorium. Althea was there, playing something light and sweet. When she finished, he handed it to her. "It's not much," he said. Suddenly shy, she unwrapped it. It was a simple, framed photograph, not of a famous composer or a grand concert hall. It was a picture Leo had asked the principal for, a picture from the school's archive. It showed the auditorium, empty and sunlit, with the grand piano centered on the stage. He'd had it matted and framed in simple, clean wood. On the small brass plaque at the bottom, he had engraved two words, asterisk asterisk the listeners, asterisk asterisk. Althea looked at it for a long time. Her fingers traced the edge of the frame. When she looked up, her eyes were glistening. "This is a good gift," she said, her voice thick. "Thank you." "No," Leo said, shaking his head. "Thank you. For the music. For the lesson. For everything." He didn't know if he'd see her much next year. His path was leading him to practice rooms and auditions, hers to quiet halls and the care of instruments. But he knew the connection would remain. It was in the keys of every piano he would ever play. He left her that evening, sitting on the stage in the pool of light, looking at the picture of their shared, silent space. As he walked out into the warm evening air, the familiar sounds of the city felt like music. He carried no guilt, no shame. He carried only the weight, the beautiful, responsible weight of a gift he now knew how to honor. And somewhere behind him, in a quiet auditorium, a psalm without regret continued to play.